As I read about the next dog, Dirk, think about how this dog is different from Ike. After we read today, I'll ask you to help Gary Paulson get a job. Think of things he might list to persuade people to hire him. Dirk, the protector. For a time in my life, I became a street kid. It would be nice to put it another way, but with the drinking at home and the difficulties it caused with my parents, I couldn't live in the house. I made a place for myself in the basement by the furnace and hunted and fished in the woods around the small town. But I had other needs as well: clothes, food, school supplies, and they required money. I was not afraid of work and spent most of my summers working on farms for $2, $3, and finally $5 a day. This gave me enough for school clothes, though never for enough clothes or the right kind. I was never cool or in, but during the school year I couldn't leave town to work on the farms. I looked for odd jobs, but most of them were taken by the boys who stayed in town through the summer. All the conventional jobs, like working in the markets or at the drugstores, were gone, and all I could find was setting pins in the small bowling alley over the 4 Clover bar. It had just 6 alleys, and they were busy all the time. There were leagues each night from 7 to 11, but the pay was truly brutal work, as only 7 cents a line. There weren't many boys willing to do the work, but with so few alleys, it was still very hard to earn much money. $1 a night was not uncommon, and 3 was outstanding. To make up the difference, I started selling newspapers in the bars at night. This kept me up and out late, and I often came home at midnight, but it added to my income so that I could stay above water. Unfortunately, it also put me in the streets at a time when there was what might be called a rough element. There weren't gangs then, not exactly, but there were groups of boys who more or less hung out together and got into trouble. They were the forerunners of the gangs we have now, but with some singular differences. They did not have firearms, but many carried switchblade knives. These groups were predatory, and they hunted the streets at night. I became their favorite target in this dark world. Had the town been larger, I might have hidden from them or found different routes, but there was only a small uptown section, and it was impossible for me to avoid them. They would catch me walking a dark street and surround me, and with threats and blows steal what money I had earned that night. I tried fighting back, but there were usually several of them. I couldn't win because I was from the wrong side of the tracks. I didn't think I could go to the authorities. It all seemed hopeless. Do you think Gary Paulson should have reported the bullies to the police or the bowling alley owner? Why or why not? Pause the video, take a moment, and think about that, please. And then I met Dirk. The bowling alley was on a second floor and had a window in back of the pit area. When all the lanes were going, the heat from the pin lights made the temperatures close to 100 degrees. Outside the window, a ladder led to the roof. One fall evening, instead of leaving work through the front door, I made my way out the window and up the ladder onto the roof. I hoped to find a new way home to escape the boys who waited for me. That night, one of the league bowlers had bowled a perfect game, 300, and in celebration had bought the pit boys hamburgers and Cokes. I had put the burger and Coke in a bag to take back to the basement. The bag had grease stains and smelled of toasted buns, and my mouth watered as I moved from the roof of the bowling alley to the flat roof over the hardware store, and then down a fire escape that led to the dark alcove off an alley. There was a black space beneath the stairs, and as I reached the bottom and my foot hit the ground, I heard a low growl. It was not loud, more a rumble that seemed to come from the earth, and so full of menace that it stopped me cold, my foot frozen in midair. I raised my foot and the growl stopped. I lowered my foot and the growl came again. My foot went up and it stopped. I stood there trying to peer through the steps of the fire escape. For a time I couldn't see more than a dark shape crouched back in the gloom. There was a head and a back, and as my eyes became accustomed to the dark, I could see that it had scraggly, scruffy hair and 2 eyes that glowed yellow. We were at an impasse. I didn't want to climb up the ladder again, but if I stepped to the ground, it seemed likely I would be bitten. I hung there for a full minute before I thought of the hamburger. I could use it as a decoy and get away. The problem was the hamburger smelled so good, and I was so hungry. I decided to give the beast under the stairs half a burger. I opened the sack, unwrapped the tinfoil, and threw half the sandwich under the steps, then jumped down and ran for the end of the alley. I was just getting my stride, legs and arms pumping, pulling air with a heaving chest, when I rounded the corner and ran smack into the latest group of boys who were terrorizing me. There were 4 of them, led by a thug. He and 2 of the others would ultimately land in prison, named, absurdly, Happy Santum. Happy was built like an upright freezer and had just about half the intelligence, but this time it was easy. I'd run right into him. Well, look at here. He came to us this time. Over the months, I had developed a policy of flee or die, run as fast as I could to avoid the pain, and to hang on to my hard-earned money. Sometimes it worked, but most often they caught me. This time, they already had me. I could have handed over the money, taken a few hits, and been done with it. But something in me snapped, and I hit Happy in the face with every ounce of strength in my puny body. He brushed off the blow easily, and I went down in a welter of blows and kicks from all 4 of them. I curled into a ball to protect what I could. I'd done this before, many times, and knew that they would stop sometime, although I suspected that because I'd hit Happy, it might take longer than usual for them to get bored hitting me. Instead, there was some commotion that I didn't understand, and the kicks stopped coming. There was a snarling growl that seemed to come from the bowels of the earth, followed by the sound of ripping clothes, screams, and then the fading slaps of footsteps running away. For another minute, I remained curled up, then opened my eyes to find I was alone. But when I rolled over, I saw the dog. It was the one that had been beneath the stairs, brindled, patches of hair gone, one ear folded over and the other standing straight and notched from fighting. Let me read that sentence again describing Dirk. Brindled, patches of hair gone, one ear folded over and the other standing straight and notched from fighting. So is that really a sentence? No, it's just a list of traits that describe Dirk. Sometimes an author doesn't use a complete sentence, but it has to fit in with the real sentences. He didn't seem to be any particular breed, just big and rangy, right on the edge of ugly, though I would come to think of him as beautiful. He was Airedale crossed with hound crossed with alligator. Alley dog. Big, tough, mean alley dog. As I watched, he spit cloth. It looked like blue jeans out of his mouth. You bit Happy and sent them running, I asked. He growled, and I wasn't sure if it was with menace, but he didn't bare his teeth and didn't seem to want to attack me. Indeed, he had saved me. Why? I asked. What did I do to deserve? Oh, the hamburger. I swear he pointedly looked at the bag with the second half of the hamburger in it. You want more? He kept staring at the bag, and I thought, well, he sure as heck deserves it. I opened the sack and gave him the rest of it, which disappeared down his throat as if a hole had opened into the universe. He looked at the bag. That's it, I said, brushing my hands together. The whole thing. A low growl. You can rip my head off. There still isn't any more hamburger. I removed the Coke and handed him the bag, which he took, held on the ground with one foot, and deftly ripped open with his teeth. See? Nothing. I was up by this time, and I started to walk away. Thanks for the help. He followed me, not close, perhaps 8 feet back, but matching my speed. It was now nearly midnight, and I was tired and sore from setting pins and from the kicks that had landed on my back and sides. I don't have anything to eat at home but crackers and peanut butter and jelly, I told him. I kept some food in the basement of the apartment building where I slept near the furnace. He kept following, and, truth be known, I didn't mind. I was still half scared of him, but the memory of him spitting out bits of Happy's pants and the sound of the boys running off made me smile. When I arrived at the apartment house, I held the main door open and he walked right in. I opened the basement door and he followed me down the steps into the furnace room. I turned the light on and could see that my earlier judgment had been correct. He was scarred from fighting, skinny and flat-sided with patches of hair gone. His nails were worn down from scratching concrete. "Dirk," I said. "I'll call you Dirk." I had been trying to read a detective novel, and there was a tough guy in it named Dirk. You look like somebody named Dirk. And so we sat that first night. I had 2 boxes of Ritz crackers I hustled somewhere, a jar of peanut butter, and another one of grape jelly, and a knife from the kitchen upstairs. I would smear a cracker, hand it to him. He took each one with great care and gentleness, and then eat one myself. We did this back and forth until both boxes were empty and my stomach was bulging. Then I fell asleep on the old outdoor lounge I used for furniture. The next day was a school day. I woke up and found Dirk under the basement stairs watching me. When I opened the door, he trotted up the steps and outside, growling at me as he went past, and I started off to school. He followed me at a distance, then stopped across the street when I went into the front of the school building. I thought I'd probably never see him again. But he was waiting when I came out that afternoon, sitting across the street by a mailbox. I walked up to him. "Hi, Dirk." I thought of petting him, but when I reached a hand out, he growled, "All right, no touching." I turned and made my way towards the bowling alley. It was Friday, and sometimes on Friday afternoon there were people who wanted to bowl early, and I could pick up a dollar or two setting pins. Dirk followed about 4 feet back, closer than before, and as I made my way along 2nd Street and came around the corner by Ecker's drugstore, I ran into Happy. He had only 2 of his cohorts with him, and I don't think they had intended to do me harm, but I surprised them and Happy took a swing at me. Dirk took him right in the middle. I mean, bit him in the center of his stomach hard before Happy's fist could get to me. Happy screamed and doubled over, and Dirk went around and ripped into his rear and kept tearing at it, even as Happy and his 2 companions fled down the street. It was absolutely great, maybe one of the great moments in my life. I had a bodyguard. It was as close to having a live nuclear weapon as you can get. I cannot say we became friends. I touched him only once when he wasn't looking. I petted him on the head and received a growl and a lifted lip for it. But we became constant companions. Dirk moved into the basement with me, and I gave him a hamburger every day and hustled up dog food for him. And many nights we sat down there eating Ritz crackers, and he watched me working on stick model airplanes. He followed me to school, waited for me, followed me to the bowling alley, waited for me. He was with me everywhere I went, always back 3 or 4 feet, always with a soft growl, and to my great satisfaction, every time he saw Happy, every time, Dirk would try to remove some part of his body with as much violence as possible. He caused Happy and his mob to change their habits. They not only stopped hunting me, but went out of their way to avoid me, or more specifically, Dirk. In fact, after the winter and spring, they never bothered me again, even after Dirk was gone. Dirk came to a wonderful end. I always thought of him as a street dog. Surely nobody owned him, and in the summer when I was hired to work on a farm 4 miles east of town, I took him with me. We walked all the way out to the farm, Dirk 4 feet in back of me, and he would trot along beside the tractor when I plowed, now and then chasing the hundreds of seagulls that came for the worms the plow turned up. The farmer, whose name was Olaf, was a bachelor and did not have a dog. I looked over once to see Dirk sitting next to Olaf while he ate some sandwiches, and when Olaf reached out to pet him, Dirk actually, this was the first time I'd ever seen it, wagged his tail. He'd found a home. I worked the whole summer there, and when it came time to leave, Dirk remained sitting in the yard as I walked down the driveway. The next summer, I had bought an old Dodge for $25, and I drove it to Olaf's to say hello and saw Dirk out in the field with perhaps 200 sheep. He wasn't hurting them or chasing them, but was just standing there watching the flock. "You have 'em with the sheep?" I asked Olaf. He nodded. "Last year I lost 43 to coyotes," he said. "This year not a one. He likes to guard things, doesn't he? I thought of Dirk chasing Happy down the street and later spitting out bits of his pants and smiled. Yeah, he sure does.